Hello my dear brothers and sisters in Christ. This is Shiny with Jesus Bytes. I want to welcome you back on our journey of exploring the Bible together. We will continue with the Old Testament with the book of Leviticus, covering chapters 20 through 24 today. Molech worship and spiritism, chapter 20. The Lord spoke to Moses. Say to the Israelites, any Israelite or foreigner living in Israel who gives any of his children to Molech must be put to death. The people of the country are to stone him. I will turn against the man and cut him off from his people, because he gave his offspring to Molech, defiling my sanctuary and profaning my holy name. For the people of the country look the other way when a man gives any of his children to Molech, and do not put him to death. Then I will turn against that man and his family, and cut off from their people both him and all who follow him, prostituting themselves with Molech. Whoever turns to mediums or spiritism and prostitutes themselves with them, I will turn against that man and cut him off from his people. Consecrate yourself and be holy, for I am the Lord your God. Keep my statutes and do them. I am the Lord who sets you apart. Family and sexual offenses. If anyone curses his father or mother, he must be put to death. He has cursed his father or mother. His blood is on his own hands. If a man commits adultery with a married woman, if he commits adultery with his neighbor's wife, both the adulterer and the adulteress must be put to death. If a man sleeps with his father's wife, he has shamed his father. Both of them must be put to death. Their blood is on their own hands. If a man sleeps with his daughter-in-law, both of them must be put to death. They have acted perversely. Their blood is on their own hands. If a man sleeps with a man as with a woman, they have both committed an abomination. They must be put to death. Their blood is on their own hands. If a man marries a woman and her mother, it is depraved. Both he and they must be burned with fire, so that there will be no depravity among you. If a man has sexual intercourse with an animal, he must be put to death. You are also to kill the animal. If a woman comes near any animal and mates with it, you are to kill the woman and the animal. They must be put to death. Their own blood is on them. If a man marries his sister, whether his father's daughter or his mother's daughter, and they have sexual relations, it is a disgrace. They must be cut off publicly from their people. He has had sexual intercourse with his sister. He will bear his punishment. If a man sleeps with a menstruating woman and has sexual intercourse with her, he has exposed the source of her flow, and she has uncovered the source of her blood. Both of them must be cut off from their people. You must not have sexual intercourse with your mother's sister or your father's sister, for it is exposing one's own blood relative. Both people will bear their punishment. If a man sleeps with his aunt, he has shamed his uncle. They will bear their guilt and die childless. If a man marries his brother's wife, it is impurity. He has shamed his brother. They will be childless. Holiness in the land. You are to keep all my statutes and all my ordinances, and do them, so that the land where I am bringing you to live will not vomit you out. You must not follow the statutes of any nations I am driving out before you, for they did all these things, and I abhorred them. And I promised you, you will inherit their land, since I will give it to you to possess, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am the Lord your God, who has set you apart from the peoples. Therefore you must distinguish clean animal from the unclean one, and the unclean bird from the clean bird. You are not to make yourselves detestable by any land animal, bird, or whatever crawls on the ground. I have set these apart as unclean for you. You are to be holy to me, because I am the Lord. I am holy, and I have set you apart from the nations to be mine. A man or woman who is a medium or a spiritist must be put to death. They are to be stoned, their blood is on their own hands. The holiness of the priests. The Lord said to Moses, chapter 21, the Lord said to Moses, "Speak to Aaron's sons, the priests, and tell them, a priest is not to make himself ceremonially unclean for a dead person among his relatives, except for his immediate family, his mother, his father, son, daughter, or brother. He may make himself unclean for his young unmarried sister in his immediate family. He is not to make himself unclean for those related to him by marriage, and so defile himself. Priests may not make bald spots on their heads, shave the edge of their beards, or make gashes on their bodies. They are to be holy to their God, and not profane the name of their God, because they present fire offerings to the Lord, the food of their God. They must be holy. They are not to marry a woman defiled by prostitution or divorced by her husband, for the priest is holy to his God. You are to consider him holy, since he presents the food of your God. He will be holy to you, because I, the Lord, who sets you apart, am holy. If a priest's daughter defiles herself by promiscuity, she defiles her father. She must be burnt up. The priest who is highest among his brothers, who has had the anointing oil poured on his head, and has been ordained to wear the garments, must not dishevel his hair or tear his garments. He must not go near any dead person, or make himself unclean, even for his father or mother. He must not leave the sanctuary, or he will desecrate the sanctuary of his God. For the consecration of all the anointing oil on his God is on him. I am the Lord. He is to marry a woman who is a virgin. He is not to marry a widow or a divorced woman, or one defiled by prostitution. He is to marry a virgin from his own people, so that he does not corrupt his bloodline among the people, for I am the Lord who sets him apart. Physical defects and priests. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron, none of your descendants throughout your generations who has had a physical defect is to come near to present food to his God. No man who has any defect is to come near, no man who is blind, lame, facially disfigured, or deformed, no man who has a broken foot or hand, or who is a hunchback or a dwarf, or who has an eye defect, a festering rash, scabs, or a crushed testicle. No descendant of Aaron the priest who has a defect is to come near to present the fire offerings to the Lord. He has a defect and is not to come near to present the food of his God. He may eat the food of his God from what is especially holy, as well as from what is holy. But because he has a defect, he must not go near the curtain or approach the altar. He is not to desecrate my sanctuaries, for I am the Lord who sets them apart." Moses said this to Aaron and his sons, and to all the Israelites. Priests and their food. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Tell Aaron and his sons to deal respectfully of the holy offerings of the Israelites that they have consecrated to me, so that they do not profane my holy name. I am the Lord. Say to them, if any man from any of your descendants throughout your generations is in a state of uncleanness, yet approaches the holy offerings that the Israelites consecrate to the Lord, the person will be cut off from my presence. I am the Lord. No man of Aaron's descendants who has a skin disease or a discharge is to eat from the holy offerings until he is clean. Whoever touches anything made unclean by a dead person, or by a man who has an emission of semen, or whoever touches any swarming creature that has made him unclean, or any person who makes him unclean, whatever his uncleanness, the man who touches any of these will remain unclean until evening, and is not to eat from the holy offerings unless he has bathed his body with water. When the sun has set, he will become clean, and then he may eat from the holy offerings, for that is his food. He must not eat an animal that has died naturally, or was mauled by wild beasts, making himself unclean by it. I am the Lord. They must keep my instruction, or they will be guilty and die, because they profane it. I am the Lord who sets them apart. No one outside a priest's family is to eat the holy offering. A foreigner staying with the priest or a hired hand is not to eat the holy offering. But if a priest purchases someone with his money, that person may eat it, and those born in his house may eat his food. If the priest's daughter is married to a man outside the priest's family, she is not to eat from the holy contribution. But if the priest's daughter becomes widowed or divorced, and has no children, and returns to her father's house, as in her youth, she may share her father's food. But no outsider may share it. If anyone eats a holy offering in error, he must add a fifth of its value, and give the holy offering to the priest. The priest must not profane the holy offering the Israelites give to the Lord, and have them bear the penalty of restitution if the people eat their holy offerings, for I am the Lord who sets them apart. Acceptable sacrifices. The Lord said to Moses, speak to Aaron, his sons, and all the Israelites, and tell them, any man of the house of Israel, or of the foreign residents in Israel, who presents his offering, whether they present freewill gifts or payment of vows to the Lord as burnt offerings, must offer an unblemished male from the cattle, sheep, or goats, in order for you to be accepted. You are not to present anything that has a defect, because it will not be accepted on your behalf. When a man presents a fellowship sacrifice to the Lord, to fulfill a vow, or as a freewill offering from the herd or flock, it has to be unblemished to be acceptable. There must not be no defect in it. You are not to present any animal to the Lord that is blind, injured, maimed, or has a running, sore, festering rash, or scabs. You may not put any of them on the altar as a fire offering to the Lord. You must sacrifice as a freewill offering any animal from the herd or flock that has an elongated or stunted limb, but it is not acceptable as a vow offering. You are not to present to the Lord anything that has bruised, crushed, torn, or severed testicles. You must not sacrifice them in your land. Neither you nor a foreigner are to present food to your God from any of these animals. They will not be accepted for you because they are deformed and have a defect. The Lord spoke to Moses, when an ox, sheep, or goat is born, it must remain with its mother for 7 days. From the 8th day on, it will be acceptable as a gift, a fire offering to the Lord. But you are not to slaughter an animal from the herd or flock on the same day as its young. When you sacrifice a thank offering to the Lord, sacrifice it so that you may be accepted. It is to be eaten on the same day. Do not let any of it remain until morning. I am the Lord. You are to keep my commands and do them. I am the Lord. You must not profane my holy name. I must be treated as holy among the Israelites. I am the Lord who sets you apart, the one who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord. That was chapter 22. Now moving to chapter 23, Holy Days. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and tell them, these are my appointed times, the times of the Lord, that you will proclaim as sacred assemblies. For 6 days work must be done, but on the seventh day there must be a Sabbath of complete rest, a sacred assembly. You are not to do any work. It is the Sabbath to the Lord, wherever you live. These are the Lord's appointed times, the sacred assemblies you are to proclaim at the appointed times. A Passover to the Lord comes in the first month, at twilight on the 14th day of the month. The festival of unleavened bread to the Lord is on the 15th day of the same month. For 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. On the first day you are to hold a sacred assembly. You are not to do any daily work. You are to present a fire offering to the Lord for 7 days. On the seventh day there will be a sacred assembly. You must not do any daily work. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and tell them, when you enter the land I am giving you, and reap its harvest, you are to bring the first sheaf of the harvest to the priest. He will wave the sheaf before the Lord, so that you must be accepted. The priest is to wave it on the day after the Sabbath. On the day you wave the sheaf, you are to offer a year-old male lamb without any blemish as a burnt offering to the Lord. Its grain offering is to be 4 quarts of fine flour mixed with oil as a fire offering to the Lord, a pleasing aroma, and its drink offering will be 1 quart of wine. You must not eat bread, roasted grain, or any new grain until this very day. And you have brought the offering to the Lord. This is to be a permanent statute throughout your generations, wherever you live. You are to count 7 complete weeks, starting from the day after the Sabbath, the day you brought the sheaf of the presentation offering. You are to count 50 days until the day after the 7th Sabbath, and then present an offering of new grain to the Lord. Bring 2 loaves of bread from your settlements as a presentation offering, each of them made from 4 quarts of fine flour baked with yeast, as the firstfruits to the Lord. You are to present with the bread 7 unblemished male lambs a year old, 1 young bull and 2 rams. There will be a burnt offering to the Lord, with your grain offering and drink offerings, a fire offering of a pleasing aroma to the Lord. You are also to prepare 1 male goat as a sin offering, 2 male lambs a year old as a fellowship sacrifice. The priest will wave the lambs with the bread of firstfruits as a presentation offering before the Lord. The bread and the 2 lambs will be holy to the Lord for the priest. On that same day you are to make a proclamation and hold a sacred assembly. You are not to do any daily work. This is to be a permanent statute wherever you live throughout your generations. When you reap the harvest of your land, you are not to reap all the way to the edge of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Leave them for the poor and the foreign resident. I am the Lord your God. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, in the 7th month, on the first day of the month, you are to have a day of complete rest, commemoration and jubilation, a sacred assembly. You must not do any daily work, but you must present a fire offering to the Lord." The Lord again spoke to Moses, "The 10th day, on the 7th month, is the day of atonement. You are to hold a sacred assembly and practice self-denial. You are to present a fire offering to the Lord. On this particular day, you are not to do any work, for it is the day of atonement, to make atonement for yourselves before the Lord your God. If any person does not practice self-denial on this particular day, he must be cut off from his people. I will destroy among his people anyone who does any work on this day. You are not to do any work. This is a permanent statute throughout your generations, wherever you live. It will be a Sabbath of complete rest per year, and you must practice self-denial. You are to observe your Sabbath from the evening of the 9th day of the month until the following evening." The Lord spoke to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, the festival of booths to the Lord begins on the 15th day of the 7th month and continues for 7 days. There is to be a sacred assembly on the first day. You are not to do any daily work. You are to present a fire offering to the Lord for 7 days. On the 8th day you are to hold a sacred assembly and present a fire offering to the Lord. It is a solemn gathering. You are not to do any daily work. These are the Lord's appointed times that you are to proclaim as sacred assemblies for presenting the fire offerings to the Lord, burnt offerings and grain offerings, sacrifices and drink offerings, each on its own designated day. These are in addition to the offerings for the Lord's Sabbath, your gifts, all your vow offerings, and all your freewill offering that you will give to the Lord. You are to celebrate the Lord's festival on the 15th day of the 7th month for 7 days after you have gathered the produce of the land. There will be complete rest on the first day and complete rest on the 8th day. On the first day you are to take the product of majestic trees, palm fronds, boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook, and rejoice before the Lord your God for 7 days. You are to celebrate it as a festival to the Lord for 7 days each year. This is a permanent statute for you throughout your generations. You must celebrate it in the 7th month. You are to live in booths for 7 days. All the native born of Israel must live in booths, so that your generations may know that I made the Israelites live in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So Moses declared the Lord's appointed times to the Israelites. Tabernacle oil and bread. Chapter 24. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Command the Israelites to bring your pure oil of beaten olives for the light, so that the lamp will burn regularly." Aaron is to tend it regularly from evening until morning before the Lord, outside the veil of the testimony, in the tent of meeting. This is a permanent statute throughout your generations. He must regularly tend the lamps on the pure gold lampstand in the Lord's presence. Take fine flour and bake it into 12 loaves. Each loaf is to be made with 4 quarts. Arrange them in 2 rows, 6 to a row on a pure gold table before the Lord. Place pure frankincense near each row, so that it may serve as a memorial portion for the bread and a fire offering to the Lord. The bread is to be set out before the Lord every Sabbath day as a perpetual covenant obligation on the part of the Israelites. It belongs to Aaron and his sons, who are to eat it in the holy place, for it is the holiest portion for him from the fire offerings to the Lord. This is a permanent rule. A case of blasphemy. Now the son of an Israelite mother and an Egyptian father was among the Israelites. A fight broke out in the camp between the Israelite woman's son and an Israelite man. Her son cursed and blasphemed the name, and they brought him to Moses. His mother's name was Shalomith, a daughter of Dibri of the tribe of Dan. They put him in custody until the Lord's decision could be made clear to them. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, "Bring the one who has cursed to the outside of the camp, and have all who have heard him lay their hands on their heads. Then have the whole community stone him, and tell the Israelites, if anyone curses his God, he will bear the consequences of his sin. Whoever blasphemes the name of the Lord is to be put to death. The whole community must stone him. If he blasphemes the name, he is to be put to death, whether the foreign resident or the native. If a man kills anyone, he must be put to death. Whoever kills an animal is to make a restitution for it, life for life. If any man inflicts a permanent injury to his neighbor, whether he has done it, whatever he has done is to be done to him. Fracture for a fracture, eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. Whatever injury is inflicted on the person, the same is to be inflicted on him. Whoever kills an animal is to make a restitution for it, but whoever kills a person is to be put to death. You are to have the same law for the foreign resident and the native, because I am the Lord your God." After Moses spoke to the Israelites, they brought the one who had cursed to the outside of the camp and stoned him. So the Israelites did as the Lord had commanded Moses. The word of the Lord. Have a blessed day. Ciao.